Thank you very much for the very kind introduction, and I really would like to take the opportunity and switch a little bit the perspectives compared with the previous fascinating speakers. And I think in these days, you need to come back to the most recent developments, the war which is Russia waging against Ukraine, because I personally believe that this is really a turning point in the history of energy systems, and will be seen in the future as a moment of a step change. And it's going even further than what we have seen in the 1970s in the first oil shock, which ended up with a pivot to nuclear and energy efficiency. But I believe this time the transition is going to be even more far-reaching, and I will give you my reasons why I believe so. So it's definitely a turning point, and I've been working in the energy industry for decades, and I know that these discussions have been only led by a small group of professionals. But now the issue of energy security and energy supply has entered a much broader stage, and so in the past it was a matter of discussions, public discussions, only if gasoline prices have been going up at the pump. But this time it's definitely different. And one of the reasons for that is energy is definitely not a fancy product. It's not existing in different colors. You can't wrap it nicely. It's definitely nothing which is a hit on the consumer markets. But it is also, on the other hand, the blood which circulates in the veins of our economy. And we have learned the hard way how important it is to secure sufficiently enough energy supply. And thank you very much also for the kind introduction. And I would give you some details what we are doing. So BlueMines Group, and I'm running the company with two partners, Evelyn and Bernard, is a company which is investing and building companies which are going along the SDG goals. This is very important to understand, because for us, working in the industry and promoting climate change is not a matter of lip service. Our money definitely goes where our word and our mouth is. And my personal background is, as you mentioned, I have been working in the energy industry, was the CFO of the trading business of Austria's largest energy group. Have built the first trading floor for energy, power and gas in continental Europe. The Brits and the Scandinavian countries have been ahead, but that was a pretty innovative activities. For Austrian listeners, this might come as a surprise, because even if I have spent decades in business, I have spent also 3 years in politics, and I'm pretty sure that finally, when I'm passed away, on my gravestone there will be set a quote which says, "He rests in peace, a politician." So be aware of your choices at the crossroads of your career. But I'm saying this to give you the understanding that my focus and my perspective on the issue we are discussing is first and foremost a business one. Saying this, we need to keep in mind that the predominant pattern, how politics and economy are interacting, is changing now. And it's not only a matter of the Ukraine and Russian crisis. We are seeing that the influence of politics in economy is on a broad scale growing. Climate change is only a matter which can be successfully prevented if politics is cooperating with business. We have seen a lot of interventions. Think about the CO2 trading schemes which have been implemented, at least in Europe. Think about Mr. Biden's Build Back Better initiatives. We have seen the same in COVID, where politics had a crucial role to bail out companies and corporates in this very hostile environment. And now we will see an acceleration of the political inventions in the economy in the next following years due to the urgent issue of securing energy supply. So this means that if you want to see around the corner what's coming next in the industry, you need to understand the patterns of this interaction between politics and economy. So if you're having now a more detailed look on what's going on most recently and switch to the developments in Russia, we need to face that this Russian war is confronting us with some very inconvenient truths. And today, I think it's not too pessimistic to say that Europe is confronted with decision alternatives which only offer very bad options for us. At least that's the case in the short term. Because if you look at the ultimate target of energy systems, which is to provide clean and affordable and secure energy, we need to notice that in short term we will neither have a secure nor a clean nor an affordable energy supply. And my personal concern is that looking a few months down the road, this is only getting worse. We know that we might come to the point where we have to increase the pressure on Russia even further. And this means that if we want that the Russians are giving in the Ukraine, we might be in a position to completely ban energy imports, mainly gas from Russia. And we're absolutely not prepared to this, because in many European countries, or in some European countries, the share of Russian energy supplies with regard to gas, for example, reaches up to 80% of the total consumption. And we have a similar situation on the commodity markets. If you look at nickel, copper, neon, aluminium, where Russia is one of our most important suppliers. So one of the consequences is that if you look at the markets, we have seen that in the most recent weeks, the prices for some products have been going even 18 times up compared to last year's. And if we translate that, which is perhaps much easier to take for some people, into the prices you are charged at the pump for gasoline, then diesel would cost 12 euros per liter. And the bad news is that these price effects have not reached the end consumers now due to structural patterns on the market, because what I'm referring to is the wholesale markets, which will set with a certain delay also the prices on the retail markets. So the consequence is easy to understand. This development will not only fuel higher energy prices, but it will also nurture inflation and drive up the costs for rents and products of daily life. And this is not only a matter of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's also because in Europe we have accepted a flawed market order for energy. And to give an example, what I'm pointing to is that the day after the Russian invasion has started in Ukraine, the volumes of gas which have been transported via the interconnectors from Russia to Ukraine to Europe have been increased by 70%. But instead of prices going down due to the increased demand, they were even going up further. And that is definitely because of the uncertainty. But this is also definitely because in between, a lot of commodity traders, not only the Russians, are benefiting from these price developments. Their business model, the business model of commodity traders, is based on upheaval and turmoil, because this is definitely fueling their benefits. And this kind of speculation amplifies the market fluctuations by far. So there are players on the market which are benefiting from the pain of end consumers, which I believe is politically not maintainable in the long term. And I've seen that the European Commission and the European Council have discussed the matter yesterday. Important to understand, again, seeing around the corner, you need to understand regulation, you need to understand political trends to better get a feeling what's going on right now. And this is an urgent matter because the International Energy Agency just recently has published a figure which says that in this year, energy companies will have excess profits because of these patterns of up to 200 billion euros. So this is an important issue. So what I would like to show you is that how intense the pressure is becoming for politics, and we have been talking about perfect storms. This is definitely a perfect mess which we have, and you can't overemphasize the challenge which we are facing in the next few months and years, because this, as I mentioned before, this energy price situation nurtures inflation, is increasing unemployment, and keep in mind that this all comes along with the migration of millions of people fleeing the terror, and we have the duty to host them and give them shelter. And remember, that's kind of a politics mix we had in the aftermath of the financial crisis 2008 and the migration crisis 2013, 20, starting. By the way, it happened. The trigger was a drought in Syria, and you know that we're also discussing crop and wheat deliveries to North African countries this time. So it's a poison political cocktail, which may have very detrimental consequences for democracies. And as an example, the outcome of this crisis we had in the aftermath of the financial crisis 2008, reaching up to 2015, was an explosion of political populism, the election of Mr. Trump in the United States, and Brexit, which we have seen here in Europe. So that's the reason, and I'm telling you this because to give you the picture why I believe that what's coming up right now is not only that we see this unbearable bloodshed in Ukraine, but we will be really forced to transform completely politics and business, and first and foremost our energy systems. What we are going through is a phase where we will see a redefinition of energy to a cleaner and cheaper system, which ends the dependence of on fossil resources. We will end up with an energy system which will be much more decarbonized, decentralized, digitized, and of course also much more democratic, because the pattern who is producing energy, who is consuming energy, and in which way we are doing that will change significantly. But for us, this means also that we are heading into an age where we definitely need very bold decisions, which we need to implement very bravely. And this implementation will be led by renewables. And this is not only something which is for climate activists an issue. It's a matter of common sense. That's at least my personal belief. Just to give you a figure, if we would have to substitute all the wind and sun power plants which we have already in Europe, we would need an additional gas supply of 1,000 terawatt hours per year. If you correlate that with the most recent prices in the wholesale markets, which is 90 euros per megawatt hour, then you will see that this would impose costs of 90 billion euros every year. So changing to renewables and CO2-free energy and power production is definitely a matter also of commercial rationality. But this transition will lead to has some downsides also, and it will lead to a more volatile and uncertain energy system, because wind and sun, easy to understand, is not always available. So, and what you need to know is, and I guess I'm telling here nothing new to the audience, is that the wholesale markets, which are underlying the retail markets, even today, perhaps the most volatile commodity markets which you can imagine. We have price deviations in 1 hour, for example, of several hundreds %, and in many hours of the day we have a negative prices today. And what you need to know is it doesn't make sense to look only at the energy prices. There is also a structure for the trading of capacities to balance the whole system, which leads to a bunch of diversified products. So all in all, it's a daily roller coaster ride, which offers, that's a good news, and tremendous value pool for new thinking. And another element, and we have seen that before, is, and I've been talking about the democratization of energy and digitization, is that we all know that in the past, the structure was pretty conservative. We had one power plant serving millions of clients and consumers. And in the future, we will see the deployment of many rooftop devices, decentralized storage elements, and the consequence will be that we will have millions of producers which are in the same moment also consumers entering the energy markets and taking an important role on that kind of markets. And this is exactly the point where software comes in. And I believe that all the challenges we have ahead can't be fixed if we don't deploy on a broad scale AI instrument. It's the only way to make the system more cleaner and more resilient. I mentioned already one of the keys, which is the addition of storage. And I'm not only talking about traditional pump hydro basins or battery storage. We will see a lot of storage implementation also with flywheels, pressurized air, and you name it. And cars, very important to understand that they are going to be also bidirectional players on the energy markets in the future. So we need that because we know that the production from renewables in some moments is abundant and in other moments it is scarce. So you need a facility which you can charge and discharge if you need it. And by definition, these assets are digital assets which you can't operate manually. And it's absolutely impossible to manage the objectives, for example, like production optimization or revenue maximization with an Excel spreadsheet. It's not working out, and you can't even do that with the traditional mechanisms of automation which are deployed in the industry. Just to give you a hint about the possibilities, and it's very important to understand that all these supply and demand patterns are driven by so many different macro data, driven by the rollout of smart meters. So much more data will be available in the future from every household on a minutes basis. We will track and then see their consumption patterns. We will see even more volatile and complex wholesale markets, and this has to be put in a model. And so the consequence is, if storage is the alter ego of renewables, then software is definitely the brain of these storage assets and all future energy assets. And how diversified the market already is, and I believe it's just a starting point. I would like to give you the example of the Australian market. So they are pretty advanced, definitely. And if you are a storage owner on the Australian market, if you had a battery in your basement, for example, and make it to a tradable asset, every 5 minutes you can choose between 18 different products you are selling the energy from your storage system. And to do this, you need a reasonable view on what's going to happen on the next 24 hours, because it might be more useful to trade the energy from your battery 5 hours later, for example. And to get an understanding for that, you need to analyze and process tons of data, do a lot of math and statistics. And so easily to see that without artificial intelligence, there is no way to optimize these systems. And coming from the energy industry, specifically from the trading perspective, there is another interesting development, because if you look at the financial markets today, almost 95% of the trades, perhaps even more, are done by algorithms and computers. If you compare that with the energy industry, power and gas, for example, you will see there is only a very, very limited number, and today mostly concentrated on the intraday markets. So But this is just one business model, because one of the colleagues has asked the previous speakers which segments you believe are the most reasonable ones, most promising ones for the deployment of AI. Definitely, it's not only the commercial optimization. There are a lot of other cash pools in many other segments. For example, predictive maintenance, which is also just starting, although the industry have been talking years about it. Also the improvement of the efficiency of investments in infrastructure, for example. And if you put this together, just the investment side, and if you assume that AI could improve the efficiency of these investments by just 1%, then up to 2050, you can save 1,300 billion euros just being saved because of the deployment of artificial intelligence. So there are great targets, large numbers, and a really huge potential which could be triggered by artificial intelligence. And let me finally come to another very structural conclusion on my side. So I have mentioned that BlueMines is building and investing in technology companies which follow the SDG requirements. And we have companies which are very much engaged in the AI sector. We have been owners of Has2Be, which was sold to ChargePoint, which is the leading provider of the invoicing and billing software for electric vehicles. We are involved in Israeli companies which are in cybersecurity for railways, for example. We are involved in a company which is monitoring the condition, the health of car batteries, which is absolutely crucial, because from 2025 on, you are obliged to recycle the batteries, and you need a benchmark how to proceed with all this stuff. And we have a lot of more companies in our portfolio. F-Site, very exciting company, will present later on the way how they see and deal with the future. But what I have experienced also is that significant parts of my life I have spent in the energy sector and in the railway sector. And today we are helping startup companies on the technology side. And my personal experience is that energy and railway are definitely the most conservative sectors if it comes to innovation. There is no other sector which is so reluctant to innovate. And if you have not the understanding that we are at the tipping point now, and if you don't see that even these super tankers, which are based on heavy metal, have to adapt and have to change the business model to data-driven business models, then I believe that we will see a significant change also in the big corporate structure. Because if they don't understand, then it's not exaggerated to say, okay, either you modernize or you die, because the change which we will face here is really tremendous. Up to now, I think the analysis that there is still a lot of resistance in the sector is absolutely right. Just this week, Financial Times has published their yearly manual about the most innovative, fastest growing companies in Europe. And we have seen that only 2 out of the first 50 are in the energy sector. And again, it's just commercial innovation and no technological innovation, which we need so urgently. So finally, there's a lot of work to do for you, and I'm very much looking forward to an exciting future. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. So thanks a lot. That was very insightful. This is also very quotable material, especially the one on the energy and rail sectors. This is already written down. We received actually lots of questions from the audience. So with regard to time management, I would, let's say, pick up 3 of them. The first one and most upvoted one is from the Austrian power grid, actually. It says, what are the main opposing factors to the widespread adoption of AI methods in the energy sector, especially in Austria?
No, I think we are just at the starting point. As I mentioned, it's a matter of mindsets also, and you need to filter out what are the most profitable models and ways to deal with. And specifically, if you look at APG, and by the way, I have been responsible for the business when I was a member of the board of directors of Verbund. So we know that resilience of the networks is becoming super crucial. Today, everybody knows that we can't afford a blackout, and we need to deploy completely new methods of working with it. Because there is a saying in Austria, and not only in Austria, but it's in the overall energy industry, that renewables is nothing which you can rely on. It's a nice to have, but you can't build your system on that. And I think the future will show that there is a proof that you can build a resilient, cheap and clean system based on renewables if you deploy the right software and optimize it. And I think this is what's going to happen. APG is definitely one of the most innovative players in the European power markets. I know the company pretty well. But again, a lot of people have to change their mindset.
Okay, maybe let's stick to the next question, which means how does regulation affect the adoption of AI in the energy sector? And let me add a second particular topic. While CapEx are accepted in the regulatory asset base by the regulatory authority, especially in Austria, OpEx are not. If you are now thinking on optimizing a grid with AI or software solutions, how would that work?
It's a good question, and I think we will only manage the future if the whole ecosystem improves, and this means that also the regulators have to learn their lesson. I'm pretty optimistic that this is going to happen. I tried to explain a little bit what I believe is that regulation is becoming more and more crucial in the sector. But on the other hand, the demands are so pressing and so urgent that I believe that regulators also have to adapt. So implementing renewables means that you really need to change the whole way how the system is acting and politics and the economy is cooperating. Just to give you an example, in the future, it was crystal clear that new gas contracts are negotiated by the big players in Austria, OMV, in Germany, RWA, Wintershall, and you name it. But last week, we have seen that the German Minister for Economic Affairs, Mr. Habeck, for good reasons and successfully, was traveling to the Emirates and Qatar and negotiating deals in detail. So this is a complete change because politics is becoming more and more an actor. And so therefore, I think what we as citizens and taxpayers should expect is that not only there is a higher level of professionality on the corporate side, but also on politics side and bureaucracy side. And so therefore, I think they can open doors with specifically if it comes to the planning of infrastructure and the size of investments, but they have to be prepared properly. And honestly speaking, my personal experience in politics was that they are very good in thinking in headlines, preparing the next press conference, but they have some limitations if it comes to strategic thinking.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. This is the perfect word you just provided with strategic thinking. It goes in the direction of your own investment portfolio. The question says, in which countries are you actively investing and where do you see regional differences, like in terms of topic or let's say round sizes and so on?
So our focus is mainly in Germany, Israel, some activities also in Austria, in the United States. But our activities in Austria are the minor part. That's one of the consequences. If you have been the former prime minister of a company, one of the privileges is that you can forget to do business in your own country because everybody says, okay, hey, what is he doing here? No, but we have some interesting activities also. Collective Energy, for example, is a company who is financing renewable projects, doing very good, and some other activities. But just want to tell you a short anecdote. You have been asking about the environment. So I think Europe is definitely improving. Macron in Paris have launched amazing initiatives. London, Berlin, Munich is prospering, and then Europe is definitely picking up speed. But the most compelling story I received is really an anecdote. I've been the CEO of Austrian Railways. It's a 45,000 business people, employees people, a business, large structures, a lot of money involved, tremendous capex, and so on. And I was invited by a young man in a hotel in Israel who wanted to present me his startup, revolutionizing the whole railway system, the global railway system, building a new ticketing system. Because if you would like to plan a travel from Berlin, let's say, to Bucharest, and buy your ticket, it's really a nightmare. It's not working out, and it's not comparable with aviation, for example. And this young guy said, okay, I'm revolutionizing the ticketing of the global railway industry. And when he was starting, I was just thinking, hey, guy, you're an Israeli-grown boy. We are sitting here in the hotel, and you're explaining me how the railway market works. But you need to take into account that the whole railway system in Israel has the length of the corporate rail system, which just first the steelworks in Linz has. So it's nothing. It's almost peanuts. But I was so impressed by the mindset of this eager and ambitious young man that when we finalized the discussion, I had a feeling, yes, he's going to be the one who's doing that. And I think it's a great story, which makes such a big difference in the Israeli ecosystems. They have proven that they are successful, and they have people who really live up to their dreams.
That's a very interesting idea. This actually sounds like building what Shippo is doing to logistics. They build an API for all the providers you do for railway. That's an interesting thing. With regard to the time, perhaps the very last question, perhaps you want to... Okay. It's about renewable energy supply is fluctuating strongly and needs tighter collaboration on the international level. How to solve the cybersecurity vulnerability?
Yeah, that's an important matter. And again, so I think if you remember back 2017, the Russian assault on Ukrainian infrastructure, they have been stopped short before taking over the power supply, but everybody believes that this would have been possible. And so it's like the nuclear bomb of infrastructure systems. And I believe that in the past, companies, also regulation, has been too hesitating to force a more strict approach on cybersecurity. It's like with COVID. Everybody has known that the pandemic would be possible. Remember Bill Gates, who has explained that on a broader scale to the public. But everybody has ignored it because it was just imposing costs and not creating value. But I think today we have learned the lesson that we have to incur this kind of costs because otherwise our whole value proposition is at risk. And I think COVID, Russian crisis will definitely speed up the efforts. Perfect. This brings us to the end of the Q&A session. Really, thanks a lot for joining. And yeah, I hope we can contribute. You mentioned your tombstone before, that in the future it will say he participated in an AAIC once, and the rest people will have forgotten long by then. I'm pretty sure. You're right. Working on it. So thanks a lot. And yeah, as to all other speakers, we will make your talk later on available on YouTube, and we will also provide you the link. So enjoy your day. It's incredibly sunny today. It's the first spring day in Vienna. So thanks a lot, and bye-bye. My pleasure. Goodbye.